Okay, Lamed Gimel, Amud Aleph, we are 8 lines down from the top of the page, and we're going back to the Mishnah, and the Mishnah says, Afilu nochosh karoch al kaver lo yafsik. Even if a snake is curling its way around your ankle, you should not interrupt your prayer, which we should see, seemingly according to Rabbi Yoin, at least it means with words. It seems a little bit in Rashi, not necessarily. It could be even with actions. Amar Rav Sheishis lo yishana ela nochash. This is only true. We only learned this in regard to a snake. Aval akrab, would it be a scorpion? Poisek, then you have to interrupt in order to get rid of this dangerous scorpion. That's part one of the Gemara's statement of Sheish is limiting the parameters of the Mishnah. Meisvei, we have a kasha from a brisa, mini amorim against a single amor. That single amor is Rav Sheishes. Nafa lugoy v'arayos ein idn olav shemeis. If a person falls into a lion's den, can you be certain that he has died in order that you can tell his wife she can get remarried? So the halacha is, no, if you see him falling into the lion's den, you cannot say that he died because maybe the lions weren't hungry and they didn't eat him. But if you fell into a pit, malaya nechashim, or yakravim, or you fell into a pit which was filled with snakes or scorpions, you can testify that he died. So you see that snakes are vicious and they do kill, and there's no distinction between them and scorpions, and therefore how can Rav Sheishis make the distinction? The Gemara answers in part 3, Shani Hosam Da'agav Itzas Amazki. It's different over there when you fall into a pit, that because of the pressure, because you squash them as you fall in, that's why they will attack you. In other words, snakes won't go and seek to attack you, but if they feel that they're attacked by you, they will respond. Part 4, Amar Vitak Ra'ash Shvarim. If you see oxen, bulls, poisek, you can stop. Part 5, Tanya Rabbi Shaya, Marchikin Mishar Tam Chamishim Amo, Mishar Muad, Kimeloi Einov. You can distance yourself from a short tam, that means an ox, which has no history of goring others, 50 amas, and if it's from a Shor Muad, which is an ox which has gored 3 times beforehand, so then you have to complete and totally get out of its way, legamre. Interesting that a short time you have to distance yourself from an ox, because one would have thought that ox is a beast of burden, it helps you in the field, and interesting that you should be cautious about them. You'd think that they are domesticated and tame. Thought. Now, in part 6, Tanan Mishmeid Rabbi Meir, Reish Tura B'Dikula, if the head of an ox in its basket that it uses to eat from, you see it, if you see an ox eating from its basket which is strung around its neck, so what should you do in response to your viewing of this ox? Salik Leigra, climb up onto the roof of Vishadi Darga Mitusach and throw the ladder from beneath you. In other words, whatever you can do to get out of its way, do. It is dangerous. Part 7, these words apply only to a black ox in the days of Nisan, which is the days of spring, because the Satan dances between its horns in the beginning of the spring season, because there's a refreshing and there's a whole coming to life of the world. The shore gets extremely excited and becomes a little bit out of control and a little bit dangerous, and therefore stay away. Part 8, there was a place where there was an arid. An arid seems to be, according to Rashi, a strange kind of reptile, which is a combination between a turtle or a tortoise and a snake. Sounds quite scary. And this arid used to go around hurting people. They went and they told Rabbi Chanina ben Dois. Rabbi Chanina ben Dois, as we've seen, has a tremendous power in the Gemara. He's a person who almost lived on a supernatural level. And they went and they told him about this happening, assuming that he should come and take care of it. Amar lehem, Hiruli es chere, come and show me his hole. Haruhu es chere, they showed him the Oroid's hole. Nosan akevo al piachor, he placed his ankle upon where the hole came up. Yotzev noshchoi, so the Oroid slinked up and bit Rabbi Chanina upon his ankle. Umeis oisoya Oroid, and after biting Rabbi Chanina, the Oroid died. Not like Seifoi, he threw it over his shoulder, which means it was probably a big reptile. It didn't say that he held it in his hand, so it was this big reptile. He threw it over his shoulders. And he brought it into the base of Medrash, this dead ored upon his shoulder. Amar lehem, and he said to the people learning the base of Medrash, Re'u banai, ein ored memis, ela chet memis. See, my sons, it is not the ored that kills, but sin that kills. Which was, Rabbi Chanina was a very powerful character, and he was confident about his level of righteousness, that he wasn't liable for any punishment, and hence he was confident that if the Ored but him, the Ored would be in trouble and not him. But at that time they said, woe to the man that bumps into him, that assaults him, and Ored. But woe to the Ored that Rabbi Chanina Medoisa bumps into him. No more Ored. Zog the Heilige Mishnah, a new Mishnah. And this Mishnah talks about additions in Tefillah, and we'll go into deep detail as to what do you add in, when do you add it in, what happens if you leave it out. You mentioned the power of rain in the revival of the dead, which means you say the words that Hashem makes the wind blow and brings down the rain. You said in that the second Brachos of Shmoneh Esrei, which ends with the revival of the dead. And request for rain that you say in the bracha on the years, which is Baruch Aleinu, where you daven for bounty in the year. Rashi points out the fact that when it uses the verb maskirin, which means mention in the first context, and Shannon request in the second, because when you say Mashiach Mergeshem, you're not requesting rain, you're simply saying Hashem's power to bring rain about. When you say V'sein Talmud Bracha, that's a request for rain. The third part in the Mishnah, third din in the Mishnah of Havdalah B'chin Nadas, you add in Havdalah, which is Atachin and Tanu. You differentiate. You say that in the fourth bracha of Shmoneh Esrei, which is Chin Nadas. Rabbi Kiva Omer Bracha Revi'is B'Ifnas. Rabbi Kiva argues on the Tanakhama. He says Havdalah should make its own separate bracha, I suppose before Atochinen, as a fourth bracha in its own right. Rabbi Lezer Omer Baidah. Rabbi Lezer says should say it in Hoidah, which is Moedim, which comes as the second last bracha. So now the Gemara goes, my time of the Gemara is going to give the reason why do you mention Gvuras Geshamim in Tchias Hameisim? What is the connection between rain and the revival of the dead? Answer: Amar Rabbi Yosef Partu mitoch sheshkul Tchias Hameisim v'fikach kavua betchias Hameisim, because rain is equated to the revival of the dead. That's why we established it into the bracha of the revival of the dead. When rain comes, it almost gives a new birth to the life. The world, the natural world, has a cycle, and the cycle is almost a life and death cycle. Things die in the winter and they're reborn in the spring, and what causes that rebirth is the abundance of rain. No rain, they remain dead. Part 3, in my time, why did we include requesting rain in the bracha on the years? Answer: Part 4, because it is the bracha which deals with sustenance, we put the request into the bracha of sustenance. Because rain is sustenance, therefore we put it in the bracha of sustenance. And now Part 5, my time, why did we include the differentiation between holy and mundane in the bracha of Chen Das? In Part 6, because it is wisdom, that's why I put in the bracha of wisdom. It requires wisdom to differentiate between what is actually kodesh and what is chol, what is mundane and what is holy. Sometimes there is a very thin line between the two. It depends on intention. If a person goes swimming, for example, well, if he's doing it to maintain his body and to preserve himself so he can be an able-bodied Oived Hashem, well, then it's kedusha. If he does it because he wants to look ripped, then it's not, it's chayil. And in Part 7, they argue and they say, not like Rabbi Yosef, but since it is it's the first bracha of declaring the mundane after the holy, it's putting in the first bracha of mundane. The first three brachas and the last three brachas are said on Shabbos as well. This is the first time you're going back to your weekday brachas. We put it there. And that's the first sugya after the Mishnah, and now we're going to the second sugya, which is going to be kind of related because it speaks about das, but otherwise not really about tefillah. Part 1. Omer b'ami gedoyle deya she'nitna b'tchila, gedoyle deya, sorry, again, Omer b'ami gedoyle deya she'nitna Amar Ami Gedoyle Dea Shenitna Betchilas Brachos Shel Choil. Gedoyle Dea, great is Dea, and this is kind of our entrance way into this new sugya. Dea, meaning the ability to distinguish, to understand, to have a knowledge of differentiation between things, and to be able to establish parameters, to think clearly, is great, and that's why we put it first off in the Brachos of Chol. Part 2. Amar Ami Gedoyle Dea Shenitna Ben Shtei Oisios. Great is Dea because it's put between literally two letters, but it means two names of Hashem. Shneimar Ki Kael Deus Hashem, because the God of Deus is Hashem, so Deus is squeezed between Kel and Hashem, and that's why it is great. V'chol mi, the Gemara adds on in part 3, V'chol mi she'en bo Deya, asul l'rachem olav. A person that has no Deya, meaning a person not who's congenitally defective in this area, but a person that has the ability to think and doesn't utilize his own ability to think, so you can't have mercy on him because essentially he's causing his own problems. Shenemar ki amloi binois hu, as the Navi says, they are not a nation of understanding. Therefore, shall have no mercy on them, their maker. And therefore, you see that you can't have mercy on a person that doesn't utilize their basic functioning mind. Omer Blaz in part 4, Gadol Mikdash, and also basic oasis. Great is the Mikdash, the temple that's given between two names of Hashem. Pa'alta Hashem, Mikdash Hashem, says Hashem, Hashem on either side, and Mikdash in the middle. And part 5, Omer Blaz, Kol Adam, Sheish Boidea, if we make an association, obviously being surrounded, enveloped by the names of Hashem is a transcendent aspect of life, and therefore an equivalent overlap is established between building the base of Mikdash and having Deya. Part 6, and this is the continuation of the explanation. Mikdash doesn't mention Oisis, and the reason is because they're both placed between two names of Hashem. Part 6, launches an attack question of Acha Karchina, based on your rationale that any word, understanding, concept that is surrounded by the names of Hashem is great. It would mean that revenge is great, because also revenge is placed between two names of Hashem. Kel Nekomos Hashem. It says Kel, it says Hashem, and in between we have Nekomos, which means revenge. Part 7, Amar Le'in, yes, correct, that it is actually great. B'milsa miyagedoili, in its matter, when it's relevant, it is super important to have revenge. B'milsa v'hainu, and now we explain what he meant by that. V'hainu, this is all part 7. Amar ula shtei nekomes halalu. Lama, because it says in the pasuk in the comments, it says it in the plural. So what are these two revenges? What are they? One is for the good of the Jewish people, and one is for the evil, the bad of the non-Jewish people. It says that Hashem will come out, he will appear from the Mount Paran, but Rashi explains that this word of fear is used a slightly different way. It means that because, and this is parallel to Gemara in Bava Kama, because the nations of the world did not keep the 7 Noachide laws, therefore if they are engaged in a suit of law with a Jew, and the Jew's ox gores the non-Jews, the Jewish person is exempt from paying for him because he has no responsibility because of the fact that they rejected the mitzvahs. So the Rashi uses the expression almost as if they declared ownerless their property, which obviously doesn't mean that you go and ransack any non-Jewish property because you're not allowed to steal from a non-Jew, but it means in a court case. So if it's run by Jewish courts, a ox of a non-Jew that's gored by a Jewish ox will not have to pay restitution. So that's l'toiva. L'ra dixiv kel nekomos fear, and Rashi explains this to mean that when Hashem gave the Torah to gave the Torah to the non-Jewish people, they rejected it. And therefore Hashem will, as it were, punish them for their rejection of the Torah. And that concludes our sugya. And now we're going on to the sugya of Rabbi Akiva and the whole sugya of when do you say Havdalah in prayer on Motzei Shabbos. Amar Rav Shimon ben Abba leRabbi Yochanan. Part 1 says Rav Shimon ben Abba to Rabbi Yochanan. Mechti, let's analyze this. Anshe Knesset Gedolah Tiknu Lem Yisrael. The men of the Great Assembly established for the Jewish people Brachos, Tfilas, Kedushas, Havdalas. They just basically put into function all the brachos we say, all the prayers that we say, the formatted prayers. They put into us the format of Kiddush and of Havdalah, both for Yomim Tovim and Shabbos. Nechzi heichi tikkun. Let's go and just see. Since the Anshe Knesset Gedolah came long before Rabbi Akiva, so why does Rabbi Akiva have any doubt where to put it? Why there is bichlal a question in our Mishnah what to do? Let's just go back to the original text and see what they said. Just one small word about Anshe Knesset Gedolah and what they did. As you see, they established the basic skeleton of our entire spiritual system as it's embodied today. The Anshe Knesset Gedolah, without them, our daily observance of Yiddishkeit would be radically different and not nearly as, I suppose, helpful in connecting to Hashem. And because they put in all these incredibly brilliant spiritual aspects of engineering, we are able to stay connected through their brilliance. But let's go back to the Gemara. So where, obviously, if they made these brachas beforehand, so Rabbi Akiva shouldn't have a dispute. It should just go and see what they did. Part 2, Amalei betchila kavua betfila. This was a problem. They did initially put it into tefillah. Shiru, then the Jewish people became rich. They put in tefillah, and then when they became more comfortable, kavu alakois, they decided it would be more elevated to make Havdalah on a glass of wine. And in the interim, they forgot the bracha because they got stopped getting used to using it in tefillah. Remember, all the tefillahs were said orally, so they forgot about Havdalah in the tefillah. They got pur again and they put it back into tefillah. So at the second stage, when they're putting it back into tefillah, that's when this machlokes comes about. Where exactly do we need to put it? But when they put it back into tefillah, they did add on an extra point. They did add, even though you've made Havdalah in tefillah, you still have to make Havdalah with a glass of wine. Part 3, Itmanami, Amr B'cheba Abba, Amr B'yirchen, Anshe Knesset Gedolah, Tiknu Lahem Yisrael, the great men of the Great Assembly enacted for them, for the Jews. Brachos utefillos, blessings and prayers, Kedushas v'Havdalos, Kiddush and Havdalah, B'tchila Kavua, B'tfila Yeshira Kavua Hakois. They initially put it in tefillah, they got rich, they put it onto the glass of wine, Chazu v'Hanu, they got pur again, Kavua b'tefillah, they put it back in tefillah, but they did say that when you make Havdalah in tefillah, you have to say it on a glass of wine. Itmar Nami, and this is part 4 of the sugya, Rabbi Yosef, again reiterating this point that if you make Havdalah b'tefillah, you do have to go again and do it on the kois. Amar Ravin, part 5. Umoitzvin nashmatin. We bring a kasha on our Gemara. Tav v'loy hizkir gvureis geshamim b'tchias hamaisim. You made a mistake and you forgot to say Mashiv Rechmod Geshem in tchias hamaisim, in the bracha of tchias hamaisim v'sheile b'berachas hashanim, or else you forgot to say Masein Talamoto Livracha in Baruch Aleinu Machzirin. So you go back to the beginning. But when it comes to saying if you forget it, we don't need you to go back. Why? Because you are capable. You could, if you wanted to, put it on the kois. You could say it in Havdalah kois, which implies that you don't have to, which goes against all the 3 statements above that said you do have to say it, even though you say in tefillah you have to say on the kois. In part 6, we give an answer. Don't say that because you're able to say it on the kois, rather because you do say it on the kois, and that's a critical Talmud key phrase of logic overriding language. LOL, logic overrides language. Itmar Nami part 7. Amar Rabbi Binyamin bar Yefes Shal Rabbi Yosi es Rabbi Yochanan Mitzidan v'Amilor Rabbi Shimon ben Yaakov demin Tzoras Rabbi Yochanan. So it was either Rabbi Binyamin ben Yafis who asked, Rabbi Binyamin ben Yafis told us about Rabbi Yosi who asked Rabbi Yochanan Mitzidan, and there were those that say it was Rabbi Shimon ben Yaakov from Tzur that asked Rabbi Yochanan. Va'ana Shamis, and Rabbi Binyamin ben Yafi heard this. Hamadu b'tfilas Tzarech Avdila Kois Oiloi. If you've done Atachin and Tani, do you still have to make Avdallah on a glass of wine? And Rabbi Yochanan replied, yes you do. Part 8, they had a question. What happens if you made Avdallah on the kois first? You first made Avdallah on a glass of wine, and then you want to daven Mariv afterwards. So you've already made Avdallah. Do you mention it in your prayer? Part 9, how much more so? Mitfila, from the fact that you say in Tefillah, and just like Tefillah, Tefillah is the essential enactment. That's where it was really meant to be. And nevertheless, when we say even though you've davened, you still have to make Avdallah on the kois, when a person makes Avdallah kois, which is really a secondary takana, it's not nearly as strong. The lav ikar takana, it's not the essential takana. Like kol shekain is another how much more so that of course you have to mention it in your tefillah part 10. Tanya Rabbi Acharicha, that was his name. Kamei de Rav Chinana, in front of Rav Chinana. Hamavdu b'tefillah meshubach yoyse mimish avdol kois. The person that makes Havdalah in tefillah is actually better off than the one that makes it on a glass of wine. Vim hivdil bezu bezu yanuchu loy brachos al roshoi. And if he does Havdalah on both of them, blessings shall rest upon his head. The Gemara asks the kasha in part 11, Hal Gufa kasha. This is internally contradictory. It's a critical Talmudic key phrase raising an internal contradiction. Amat, you said. A person that makes Avdallah in tefillah is better than one who makes it on a glass of wine. Alma, you see, tefillah l'chuda sagi. You see that davening alone is enough. It's almost you've got two options, which is better. Tefillah is better. But then you went and taught, and then you said if you made Avdallah in both of them, blessings shall rest upon your head. But since you've already fulfilled your obligation with one of them, iftar, you have exempted yourself, and therefore when you make the bracha on the wine, it is an unnecessary bracha, and you're not allowed to do it. As we see, as they said, that both of them said, a person that makes a bracha which is not required, he transgresses the prohibition of not lifting Hashem's name in vain. Part 12, rather, this is how you have to learn the statement of Rav Acharicha in front of Rabbi Chinana. Im hivdil bezu if you made Havdalah in this and not in that, you didn't do it in both, then you should have brachas upon your head. Rav Chisda is a shayla that you asked from Shaitis, and this is in part 13. You made a mistake both in Tefillah and in Havdalah. Now, what does that mean? Mahu, what is it then? So the Rishonim explained, the Rosh Rabbeinu Yonah, that you didn't say Atachon and Tanu, and then you forgot to say Havdalah and you ate. So now you haven't made Havdalah and you haven't made Atachon and Tanu. What should you do? Can you just say Havdalah since you forgot about it demonstrated by the fact that you ate? Amalei. So Rav Sheshes replied to Rav Chisda, no, if you actually forgot Hatachon and Tanu and then you ate and forgot Havdalah, you have to go back to the beginning and say your Shemona Esrei again, and that's part 14. Part 15. Ravina asked Rava, what is the halacha? What is the halacha? Do we need to say Havdalah on a glass of wine once we've davened in Tefillah? Amalei in part 16, Ki Kiddush. My Kiddush, this is like Kiddush. My Kiddush, Avagavta Mekash Beslois Mekash Akase. Just like Kiddush, even though you daven your Friday night and your Friday night prayer and you mention the holiness of the day, which is Kiddush, you still make Mekash Akase, you still make Kiddush on the glass of wine. Af Havdalah Nami. So to Havdalah, Avagavta Mavdil Betzelusa, even though you've already made Havdalah in prayer, Mavdil Akasa. You still make Havdalah on the glass of wine. And that draws to a close Daf Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph, stretching on to Lamed Gimel Amud Base, and we're excited to continue ever further in our journey through Shas. See you later.